Hey guys, welcome to today's PA Cape webinar. The Pennsylvania Council on American Private Education has several sponsors that work well with schools and actually nonprofits and other organizations. And I'm really excited as executive director to tell you about the Convoy Group. So we have a short presentation today. And again, they do an amazing job. I would share that I've worked with this group. They did some work with us on our campus, and Chris did a great job. I just want to say a couple things real quickly about them. They are very, very good, and as you can tell from their name and as they move along, these guys have military backgrounds and they have done security at multiple different levels. I just want to share as a school. Sometimes we see those things and are a little concerned because we think, what are these guys going to do? Put barbed wire around our front door? And I would just tell you from my experience, they are very, very in tune with what school communities need and how school communities work in real life security issues. So my experience has been very positive. We're so excited to have them as sponsors of Pennsylvania Cape. So I'll introduce Dave and Chris and the Convoy Group, and just jump in, guys, and tell us a little bit about what you've got going.
Thank you for that introduction. So just so everyone's aware, my name is Dave Franklin. I'm one of the co-founders of Convoy Group. We'll get into our backgrounds a little bit more in a following slide, but I was an Army Special Forces, been in the security consulting world for going on 8 years now. And I'm joined here with my colleague, Chris Klossner, who's also an Army Green Beret and has been in the security consulting world for about the same amount of time. So just one over the world on the company, we are veteran owned. Our leadership team has over 85 years of global security intelligence experience, both in the public and private sector. And as Merle has already alluded to, we provide a range of service offerings that include everything from security assessments for private, independent, parochial schools to also working with multi-jurisdictional law enforcement agencies and Fortune 100 companies. Quick snapshot of the leadership team. So obviously, Chris and I are up there. Also has my business partner, Michael Brode, who's also a veteran. And we recently brought on a guy who just retired from the Marine Corps, 22 years of service, to be a part of the leadership team as well. All right, so let's get right into the nuts and bolts of it. So for school security grant related services, we like to approach everything from the top down. It's difficult to understand where you're going if you can't define it, or even like the pathways to get there. So what we really try to do is define the end state and then work backwards from that, because we want to understand what success looks like for the organizations that we work with. And this primarily revolves around a comprehensive security assessment that, in this case, is PCCD compliant, and then also interviews to help drive strategy, because, understanding the physical infrastructure is one thing, and where the vulnerabilities may lie, but really getting into the weeds of the culture, the procedures, or the lack thereof with people that really matter the most and have purview into those operations is very important, and that really helps define the strategy for achieving the desired end state. Another thing to understand is transparency is one of our values, and we really pride ourselves on being collaborative. So what we like to do is provide access to high quality vendors. So, we are very clear about, hey, this is not Convoy Group. We have a company that we work with, that we trust, that provides, camera systems, for example, or access control infrastructure, or emergency communications, or even, individuals that are experts in behavioral threat assessment, and not something that we upcharge for. If you need this capability, we're happy to connect you and provide access to our network that we've developed over a number of years, because it's the right thing to do whenever you're working with clients. We'll also have access to specialized grant writers that help with nonprofit security grants, both for ethno-religious institutions, but also schools. And as I mentioned before, this really is a collaborative and transparent process. It's not like we come in and we're like, hey, we're the experts. Here's what you need to do. This is templated. There are some frameworks and some concepts that help drive the way that we approach engagements, but ultimately it's really designed to be customized and creative and adapt to the culture and specific institutional requirements of the organizations that we work for. We are PCCD approved to provide school security guards. and also school security assessments. These are highly detailed reports, and I think one of the things that really differentiates them, and I'll let Chris touch on this briefly, is that these reports are organized in such a way as that they provide not just the information in terms of where vulnerabilities may lie or even where there are successful approaches to security, but what is most critical, what is most vulnerable, and what are some timelines around remediating these vulnerabilities that are also budget friendly. So it's not like you get a piece of paper or several pieces of paper and you say, okay, this is great, but how do I approach this? We like to help provide clients with a guide and framework for ameliorating these vulnerabilities that also takes into account their budget, their culture, and the other resources that they have available. Chris, if there's anything you want to briefly add to that, please feel free.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Yeah, so on top of the prioritizations, the other thing that makes our reports a little unique and separate is for each vulnerability that we do find, obviously you'll have a picture. It'll be categorized, whether it's in the perimeter, exterior, interior, the process, people, or equipment. And each one will have at least 2 to 3 at a minimum of recommendations on how to fix a said vulnerability. And I try to keep it like you'll have the book answer direct from authoritative sources such as DHS, FEMA, CISA, you name it. Sometimes state level, sometimes county level, and even the language from PCCD themselves, which if you've ever read it, can be quite confusing, but we've gone through it multiple times. We'll put all the language in there as well as cite the exact sources that we use for each recommendation. So therefore that assessment report can be used for grants. We've had other clients in the past successfully get grants from our assessments. And on top of that, I also try to keep in some recommendations on to be very budget friendly. So sometimes you don't always need the most expensive school lock in the world. Sometimes a deadbolt will suffice, things like that. So we try to keep it, in realistic terms based off budgetary constraints.
Yeah, and the final piece I'll add to that, and Merle also alluded to this, is the most important thing from our perspective is people. It's not technology. Technology supports the decisions that people make, but ultimately, you can have the most advanced camera analytics in the world. You can have an entire security operations center that's fully staffed, but if those pieces of the puzzle can't speak to each other, there's not a process in place for being able to identify potential issues and adjudicate them and deal with them at the level of individual people who have to make decisions. Especially in a time of crisis, then having that advanced technology doesn't do anybody any favors. So, they're great. They're a wonderful thing to leverage, but ultimately, it's the decisions that people make and the process that they have to follow that are the most important. All right, I'm going to move on unless there are any specific questions and just go through the rest of the presentation. Anything right now? Okay. All right, so just a snapshot of some recent engagements in the education sector. So obviously, we've worked with a number of multi-campus K-12 schools over the past several months, private faith-based school, special education school, even higher education on the audit and compliance assessment side. These institutions range from 700 plus students to 10,000 plus students to geographically disparate campuses to single campuses. It include everything from supporting grant funding liaison to, I guess in the modern lexicon, providing fractional support for security directorship, vis-a-vis, a security director that we have for part-time, but is a member of Convoy Group, to even guards, specialized training for guarding, for the guards, for staff, emergency management plans, vulnerability assessments. And we recently were selected to run breakout sessions for the PA Safe School Summit, which occurred just a number of weeks ago. Chris actually led those breakout sessions, and he presented on how to utilize social media to protect schools and the ways to integrate those capabilities with behavioral threat assessments in the overarching security program, but also on how to develop these holistic security programs so that they are durable and they're also defensible and they're integrated. Because it's great to develop a program or to have an emergency management plan, but if it can't outlast that initial conception, it really can be of some cost, and we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. Just a quick overview of some industries we serve. As Merle mentioned, we work with high net worth individuals, private schools, multi-jurisdictional law enforcement agencies, and other organizations as well. Those services range from executive protection to the vulnerability assessments to duty of care solutions for overseas travel and everything in between. And this just sort of outlines our philosophy for the way that we approach the majority of these engagements, right? They're customized and tailored. We have a diverse field of expertise. I think one of the most important things about our company is that we have people that have a diverse array of backgrounds, from special operations to law enforcement to corporate security to school security experts and individuals that were executives in FEMA. And we really understand that these should be continuous processes that adapt as organizations change. And here just a list of some relevant organizations that we're affiliated with. Everybody from the Pittsburgh Tech Council, which is a great resource for these physical security providers, to obviously PA Cape. And we actually have a partnership with Franciscan University of Steubenville. We have a joint curriculum that we provide for security-related training. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the Western PA Leadership Collaborative. And that is it. So I'm going to go back to the services slide or the recent engagements and open the floor to any questions you may have for myself or Chris.
Very helpful, Dave. Very helpful. So let's just open it for if there's anybody that has a couple questions. I do have a couple things I'd like to ask, but does anybody have anything from the audience that they want to ask? Just jump in.
Sure. Dave, Shaw McAleer, formerly with the Pennsylvania Catholic Conference, the education director, which meant I was the policy guy for all Catholic schools in Pennsylvania. I also sat on CAPE for a number of years, and I'm their lobbyist now. One of the things that I hear a lot is that schools don't know how to apply. You got to remember their head of schools or their principal or whatever you want to call it. They have a lot of responsibilities and wear a lot of hats. So they're not exactly sure how to go through the process of applying for the security grants. Now, the diocese helped out. All our dioceses have school offices and they help out, but we do miss some schools. And I know a lot of other private schools, they don't even know where to start. So if a school had questions of that sort, would they be able to turn to you and ask, besides the services you provide, which is great, which is a lot of the services that the schools need, but could you help walk them through the application process?
Yeah, we could help walk them through the process to an extent. At some point, there becomes like a real comparative advantage with using a specialized grant writer. And when we reach that limit, we're very open about it, and we'll let them know, hey, we have some grant writers that we can recommend. Just totally up to you if you want to, but we've reached the limit of our ability to really help you be as competitive as possible. So to answer your question, yes, but there is a time and a place for bringing in somebody who does that for a living.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, Dave.
Other questions?
Dave, Steve Lindquist with the Association of Christian Teachers in Schools. So you mentioned the behavioral threat assessment. I think that's a very critical component. From my perspective, if we can identify behaviors before the threat actually even occurs, we can mitigate a lot of different scenarios. Can you explain what you guys do in that and how you train the school leaders and teams inside the school to be able to identify those kinds of things that are happening on campus?
Excellent question. So there's actually two parts to it. So there's the broader situational awareness component to it, which revolves around understanding what normal looks like in a given environment and being able to recognize what is referred to in the like situational awareness field as an anomaly. So something that falls outside of what normal is. But then there's also the actual component of trained behavioral threat assessment professionals. So that's the kind of thing that we will bring in an expert to develop policies around and also to help provide specific staff training. So there's the overarching general component to it. And then there's also the, hey, let's bring in an expert to discuss the specifics of these programs. So you're absolutely right to put to identify that being one of the most important components of it. It's really all about preventing these potential issues more so than it is mitigating them, because or even responding to them, because as the data shows, for one, there's just not a lot of literature on that side of it. There hasn't been a lot of like substantial academic work to help identify the efficacy of those sorts of approaches. But ultimately, you don't want them to happen. So I think, as much as we are a security company that provides security related services in the school space, one of the most important things is understanding like what is your strategy based on your ed state, and how do you leverage the most critical components of like safety and security programs. And a lot of times that's the behavioral threat assessment side.
Right. And I think when somebody hears school security grant, they're thinking outside coming in rather than looking at what's the student population on the inside and helping them not become a threat from within the sleeper mentality kind of conversation.
Right.
And so I think, the Commonwealth of Virginia mandated 2 years ago, all schools, public and private, have to have BTAM trained people on staff. I think that's going to become a wave, a trend across the country. So, it's been on our radar for a while. So I'm glad to hear you guys are in that sphere and bringing that into attention with schools.
Yeah, it's also not I don't want to use the term myopic, but it's also not just relegated. These aren't siloed efforts, right? So
Right.
the behavioral threat assessment components or side of it, is necessary. It should be necessarily integrated with like the assessments. So assessments that are CP10 or crime prevention through environmental design driven, those are also designed to provide like welcoming environments, because for the limited literature that is out there, that's a part of it as well. So when students feel like they're in an accepting, welcoming environment, and the physical security is designed as such, it supports, right? That's a supporting component of the assessment side, and just the overarching culture and environment of that particular school. So all of these are connected.
Yeah.
Some are more heavily weighted than others, but you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the PTAM side is a huge part of it.
Yep. Thanks.
Super conversation, guys. Any other questions? Just a couple things from my perspective. One is I don't know the answer to this. Do you guys work outside of the state of Pennsylvania? So for schools in other areas, they can you address that at all in case they would, because we run into people all the time that are looking for services.
Yeah, we actually work from coast to coast. So
Okay.
From San Francisco to the DMV, we're licensed in multiple states, and we're in the process of attaining more licensing this year. But even in states that we're not licensed in, to provide like specific like school security guards or executive protection agents, for example, the way that the security industry works is these are oftentimes for the provision of services are subcontracted. So that's always an option. But then there's also like, hey, we want to directly contract. Do you know any? Do you have any recommendations for specific vendors that you've worked with the industry? It's also a way that we approach it. There is no one size fits all model. It's all based on what the appropriate fit is and how we can ultimately help the end client.
Right. I know in Pennsylvania, you guys I know work with the school safety grants for both public schools and private schools. I believe you work with the nonprofit grants, which is, I don't know if you're required to be a 501c3 or just a nonprofit, but so for example, churches or schools can actually apply for that as well if they're part of a 501c3. And then I believe you guys do part of the FEMA grants as well too, right? Now for some of our faith-based schools, there's some questions about that because of it's too much to go into here, but is there any other grants that you guys particularly work with that our schools should be aware of?
Well, the faith-based, excuse me, can't talk today. The faith-based grant is definitely one of them. And as interestingly enough, private independent parochial schools, but also the religious schools are one of the, and just religious institutions in general have been a pretty big focus of the company over the past 2 years.
Okay, cool. Very cool. Again, then if there are any other questions, we can finish up there, but I'll let you guys have the final word. But I, again, want to just add from a personal note, I've worked with these guys And our organization, both from a training perspective and from an assessment perspective. And although I know there's some free assessments out there and the state police do some things, these guys are really comprehensive and really do, at least from my perspective, listen very well, and heard kind of our culture and helped us put together a good assessment that could drive us to move to the next level. So, Dave, Chris, anything else you guys want to add in closing? I don't know if your contact information, maybe share your contact information here, if you would. Okay.
Let me go to the final slide here. This right here is our info inbox. Everybody in the company that needs to have it will be able to get that. But I can also provide you with, Merle, you have our direct contact info, so right. Please feel free to put that up there as well, both mine and Chris's. Mm-hmm. And that's our operations line, which is staffed 24/7. So please feel free to reach out via email or phone call should we have any questions.
And again, feel free to reach out to any of the associations of Pennsylvania Cape. Go to our website at PA Cape, www.pacape.org, and these guys are listed on there with the other sponsors. Or you can email me. Probably the easiest email would be info@champion.org, and I'll be glad to connect you guys as well too. So thanks, Dave and Chris. Appreciate you guys for being here. Hope that the schools take advantage of what you have available. Appreciate it.